Welcome back, everyone, to another episode here at Rabbit Hole Stories. And today we had Tony on from the Bitcoin Way. And I have to say, Ian, what a charismatic guy. He's full on energy. He goes full into it, what he's saying. Very knowledgeable. He has a cryptography and a IT background. And all in all, very proactive to getting more people on board.
100%, Joel. And the energy this guy's got is great, because what it reminded me of is that when you sort of really fully understand the value that Bitcoin has, I don't know, it's almost like this self-perpetuating machine of energy that it gives you, right? It gives you this sort of new drive, this purpose. And you got Tony at the helm of the Bitcoin way, and he's sort of all about self-sovereignty and guiding people towards that, and educating people the value of that. And in this episode we go into ETF Bitcoin versus actual self-sovereignty Bitcoin. We touch on Lebanon and various other sort of avenues of this rabbit hole, and it's a fascinating one. And if you guys were sort of confused about how to get into self-sovereignty, they offer a 30-minute free call for anyone that might be wanting to sort of like go that way, and I'm most definitely encourage you to do that. But I won't delay anyone else. Let's go straight into this rabbit hole. And for everyone else out there, thank you for your finite time, and as always, stay curious. Hello, fellow rabbit hole dwellers. Yet another week here, and Happy New Year to all of you. Today we've got the brilliant Tony Yazbeck, who is the co-founder, educator, and consultant with the Bitcoin Way, whose mission is apparently to empower individuals and businesses to take control of their finances, embrace financial sovereignty, and navigate the world of Bitcoin with confidence. Tony, it's an absolute pleasure to be hosting you here today at Rabbit Hole Stories. How has your day been?
Thank you so much, man. I'm really happy to be here. My day has been fantastic. It's been a roller coaster of events, since the beginning of the year, and it shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon.
No, it does not. Absolutely. And it's been an up and down roller coaster ride within the last 48 and 72 hours. And what's your immediate reaction to this whole ETF approval? And do you have any insights for us that you want to share?
Yeah, my immediate reaction is I expect a tsunami of unknowns coming our way very, very quickly.
Right.
We've never seen anything like this before. We've never had anything like this before. No one really knows how it's going to play out, even those involved, in the ETFs. I mean, they understand why they're in it, but, we've never had this movie before. We're producing it as we go along in real time for the first time in history.
Yeah, it's almost like they've jumped in, and now the whole space is spinning around trying to sort of orientate themselves to try and understand what the impact is for Bitcoin, and all the boomers that are now investing in indirectly into Bitcoin, and what the impact that's going to have. And obviously at the time of filming this, we've had this as in less than 24 hours since it's been approved at the time of recording, and it's spiked right up to like 50,000, and it's tanked right down again. So I sense a lot of volatility in the short term, but long term it's going to have obviously a number go up impact that we haven't yet really been able to yet comprehend. And I don't know if you share that opinion, Tony.
Yes, for sure. I mean, we've never had anything like Bitcoin in the existence of humanity, something that is fixed and finite in supply no matter what. It's nothing and no one can change that rule. But at the same time, we've got an infinite demand shock, just waiting at the gates to unleash right into this one asset that everybody's going to want once they understand, why it's such a big deal. For the first time, you have an asset, money, that's a store of value, a currency, but more importantly, that no one can take away from you, and that you need nobody's permission to use, and nobody can dictate, how much of it you spend, where you spend it, and all that stuff. That's why it's such a big deal. It is literally your key to living a free life.
And what I find super interesting is I now get, we all get this probably. You get forwarded the links by your friends and family, and, they see, I don't know, who's been on TV today, like the FanX CEO, and they go, oh, have you seen, he says the same thing you say. And you go like, yes, I know, but because when I said it, you didn't believe me, and now because he says it, you believe him. But the saying he says is still true, but don't believe him. You're immediately in this fighting position. But obviously, if you look at it from the bigger picture, it does obviously help if you then have these, Christmas dinners and your uncles have invested into these things. You can then sort of poke out the elbows and go like, yeah, it's a start, but like you should own proper Bitcoin and not like paper Bitcoin. So I see it as like an evolution, but it's definitely been a wild 24 hours.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this whole ETF is going to be one massive crash course in monetary education for so many people. I mean, a lot of folks that haven't touched Bitcoin all this time, they haven't touched it simply because out of, part of it is laziness, that's for sure. It plays a big role. But, there's a lot of ignorance and just fear. Fear that this can't possibly be true. It's too good. Somehow the government is going to shut it down. It really always comes back down to this fear of the government, like the big bad wolf that is somehow cemented from now to eternity and that nobody can get around and nobody can, escape from, which is ludicrous. So that's where, a lot of the hesitation, a lot of the fear, a lot of the, all the excuses that kept folks from taking the time to learn about Bitcoin, they all fall along somewhere, in those descriptions. But now all of a sudden, when the big boys, those that have the $1 trillion balance sheets, now when they say it's cool, wow, now all of a sudden, Bitcoin, oh, it's not so bad after all. Let's take a look. Maybe we can make some money out of this. But, initially, a lot of folks are going to go into the ETF thinking they're going to make money in US dollars or in fiat, which is, the whole premise of these things, that they've still understood categorically nothing about money. The whole premise of Bitcoin is to replace that garbage and, to finally understand that you've been living a scam for the past 100 years, but that's been created by a group of professional thieves sitting right next to a money printer where they're living like kings, and you're that little, useless and meaningless peasant that has to work for it all the time. But every Ponzi has its expiry date, and now we're really at the end of it when things are blowing up all over the place and people are realizing, hey, I can't afford anything anymore. My salary is X, but my expenses are X times 10. So the fuck do I do? Like, how do I pay for this? So then you realize, that something's wrong, and when it finally clicks that you're spending your time and energy to earn toilet paper, debasing money that not only is losing value like at a crazy rate, but that is controlled and manipulated by someone that doesn't give a damn about you. Whether you live or die, they don't care. For you, you're just like some meaningless number. So when you understand this, but to understand this, you need to unlearn, be willing to unlearn everything you thought was the truth. So, and I've said this before, not many people take nicely to accepting that they've been an idiot essentially their whole lives, and now all of a sudden they have to accept that we have to change the mindset. This is how we have to think now, and this is how we have to act, and this is our exit. So the hesitation in a big way comes because of that, at least in my experience, based on my conversations with hundreds of folks.
Tony, you hit the nail on the head in the sense that when it first clicks, that's what it means going down a rabbit hole ultimately, isn't it? It's the realization that something isn't quite right here, and that's when you start going on this journey of unlearning everything. You sort of try and think of things or see things through the Bitcoin lens, right? And it causes you to sort of fall deeper down this rabbit hole. And I've got this sort of visual of the Bitcoin way with a fork in the road, as now the ETF is an option for people to go down, and you're like, no, stop, go this way, not that way. And I'm just curious as to how that has evolved for you and how you've come into now co-founding the Bitcoin way and trying to show people the right way to go. And now you guys are at the helm. What is it that you're trying to do to try and encourage and educate people to come into Bitcoin? And how is it that you ended up being the person that thought, this is something that's needed within not only the ecosystem, but as an avenue for people to get into understanding what self-sovereignty is?
I understood Bitcoin, unfortunately, from a terrible story. I hands-on witnessed the destruction of the financial economy in Lebanon, where literally overnight people's bank accounts were wiped clean, and they were kicked out of them, from one day to the next. When you live through something like this, you know, you will never forget it, because, you know, it's one thing to listen to it in theory, somebody telling you a story, but when you're actually, you know, touching it, feeling it, living it, it's unlike anything you can possibly imagine. It is the most painful, psychological, mental, whatever you want to call it, that you can ever go through, and I don't wish that on anyone. So when that happened, you know, you have two choices. You know, you're like, my life is over, or I have to do something to get back up. But it's easier said than done now, but in the moment, it feels almost like an impossible position to get back up from, you know, because your entire life, your whole life, like this, gone. It's like a light switch. So if I were to come to you now and just like take away everything you own, leaving you with exactly the clothes that you're wearing and the change in your pocket, and that's it, what do you do? Right?
Yeah.
So, and this is exactly what happened. And so when you go through something like this, I was like, I have two options. Either I go the dark road with the dark thoughts that go through your head, or you try to find a solution. So I'm sitting here now, obviously, I wanted to find a solution. And that's what gets you into the rabbit hole, to understand how can something like this possibly happen to someone like me? Okay, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I've been in cybersecurity, encryption. You know, I don't consider myself an idiot. But if something like this can happen to me, like, what the fuck, man? There is something going on that I was not aware of. And this is what led me down the rabbit hole to start digging and digging and digging. And then COVID was the icing on the cake. COVID was the icing on the cake that confirmed for me without a shadow of a doubt that this world that we live in is a criminal organization at work, nothing more. There's a bunch of psychopaths that think they have the right to play God to dictate how you live your life. And unfortunately, for the last 3 years, 80% of the population have confirmed without a shadow of a doubt that they're brain dead, with lacking the capacity to think for 5 minutes, to question, wait a minute, something is not right. Why is it not right? Most folks didn't even do it. Why? Oh, because the government said so, so it has to be right. Okay, you fucking idiot. Now you injected something into your body that you can't take out. Congratulations. Now that the truth has finally come out, now what are you going to do? Now you're going to keep your mouth shut because you don't dare, you know, admit that you fucked up, you know, and like take the right measures. But thankfully, there's a bigger portion of the population that have seen that, you know, and are understanding that none of this stuff made sense, and now they're, you know, taking the right steps to learn why. And when you realize that this whole thing comes down to money, that this whole ring of professional thieves are behind this, there's nothing you won't do to get out of the system. And thankfully, we do have something like Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto, he, she, they, whoever they are, they understood this a long time ago. And they created this and they released it, hoping, praying that it would go unnoticed long enough that the decentralization of it would expand to a certain point where it cannot be stopped. Thankfully, that happened. Because had these crooks been paying attention to this in 2009, 2010, you know, in the early days, they could have easily killed it. You had nowhere near the level of decentralization that we have now, but they didn't. They thought it was like some Mickey Mouse money internet scam, whatever it is. They ignored it. And
how wrong were they?
Yeah, exactly. And now, you know, fast forward to today. Now all of a sudden you've got, you know, the world's biggest institutions, you know, the BlackRocks, the Vanguards, all these guys. It's a flight to quality. Wow, you know. And now all of a sudden, the lazy folks were like, oh, have you heard of this thing called Bitcoin? You understand? It doesn't really matter though, because ultimately everybody's going to get affected by this Ponzi. Those that have a larger number of zeros in their bank account, it might take them a little bit longer, but ultimately, you know, they're in the same system of that leaking bucket. So eventually those zeros are going to go from whatever they are to 1-0. You know, just like it did to the folks in Argentina, Venezuela, Lebanon. There's no place on earth where you think you're hiding, where you think that you're immune. It doesn't exist. That's like an illusion that you may be, you know, telling yourself. So once you understand this and you start reading the books and you're listening to folks, you know, that have also done the work and are also trying to put the truth out, well then, you know, that's it. Once it clicks, there's no way to unclick it. And why did we put the Bitcoin way together? Is because we understood that this Bitcoin is technology. Okay, it's involved. There's like, most folks are not tech folks. Sitting in front of a computer is very daunting to a lot of people. Just sitting in front of a computer, let alone doing air-gapped wallets, setting up nodes, you know, doing all that. That's like, whoa, you know, it's like, it's a foreign language. Not many people are going to jump headfirst into it, even if they understand that it's the solution to their problem. They just won't do it. And some of them will go as far as not even admitting that they need help. They'll just stay quiet and not do anything and just blow up, you know, because of something as silly as this. So we put together this Bitcoin way in order to help onboard as many people as possible into proper Bitcoin self-custody by doing all the work for them. So you're not good on a computer, no problem. You don't have to be good. You just have to be able to follow instructions, you know, that we will guide you, like we'll break it down into baby steps that anybody can understand, plain English. And by the time we're done, we will take weeks, months, years of studying that you would have done on your own in a matter of hours. And you will go from zero to airtight in no time. That's what this is what we're doing. And at the same time, you know, providing the education, the knowledge, the truth about what this is about, where the value of this comes in, why it's important, why you must consider it, you know? And this is our mission. And for us, there is no turning back, you know? I mean, and obviously we're not alone in this space. There's many folks like us doing this, but we are very gung-ho on sticking to the Bitcoin ethos. We do not sway. This is why, you know, all the products that we work with are only open source or verifiable source. We disqualify anything and anyone that supports censorship, functions with chain analysis. All of that bullshit is out. You know, we're not here to play by the rules of a system that Bitcoin was designed to replace. That system must go. It's in the best interest of no one except those who designed it. So that's, you know, that's the message that ultimately I believe that the world will finally understand. It might take a long time for some people. You know, everybody functions at their own pace. But ultimately, the Ponzi will affect you in a way that you won't be able to withstand anymore. And you're going to look for a solution, an explanation that makes sense. And ultimately, all roads lead to Bitcoin.
And what always people look for when they're about to board a ship is a strong, passionate, and well focused captain at the helm. And I get that sense of energy from you, that you're the guys that are allowing people to come on board, and you're going to navigate in those choppy waters. And sometimes it can be a little bit complex and hard to understand how to actually do those steps towards self-sovereignty, and it's a testament to you guys that you're trying to get people not only to understand how important it is that you should become self-sovereign, but also these are the ways to do it, and then hopefully that can get the signal out there to a wider sort of community, you know. And it's not always been easy to self-custody Bitcoin, and as technology advances it does get easier and easier, but you know, we're still in that transition phase now that Bitcoin has gone mainstream with Wall Street and things like that. Again, they sort of obviously kick out their own narratives, right, and sort of build their own ships and invite people on that. So you guys got to sort of obviously continue that signal that you're putting out there, and we're more than happy to help you do that and get that signal out there. And one of the things that I picked up on in your original sort of communicating to us about Bitcoin is this criminal organization that you referred to, and how people are just sort of like willing to be the lambs to the slaughter, if you like. And part of that, I think, is because they've co-opted fucking everything, including education and the media, big pharma, whatever sort of industry you want to sort of bring up. They've co-opted it, and they've corrupted the core of the essence of what how we understand and our perspectives in the world, right? And it's difficult to sort of communicate something as beautiful as Bitcoin. And you say Satoshi Nakamoto, it's almost like too good to be true, right? And then they start sort of like remembering all the FUD that the media have put out there about it, and then the more sort of you talk about it in the way that you've just been articulating it to us, people think, that this starts triggering off conspiracy theories, and people are just so confused and gaslit that it's hard for them to actually understand that the signal we're trying to put out there is for everyone's benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's no, I completely agree. It's very hard for someone to accept that they've been fooled, let alone admit that, they understand that they've been fooled. It's not an easy thing. And self-custody, it's not that it's hard. Like I say this a million times, it's just new. And yes, it is technology. So if you've never lived in that world, the tech world, on a computer, doing things online and all that, it could be very hard to conceptualize something that you can't hold with your hands. It's like, if I give you like a barrel of diamonds and gold and I put it in your living room and I tell you, well, this is yours now, but you need to, protect it. The amount of infinite ideas that'll come to you to protect this barrel are almost instant. But because Bitcoin is something virtual, it's, it's out there, right? Not many people's brains are able to wrap around the fact that this thing actually has value because of X, Y, and Z, right? And this is where, taking the time to sit down, learn, understand, we live in the tech world. We're not going back to the Stone Age. There's no typewriters anymore. Computers, now we have AI. So it's like computers on steroids. You have to accept that this is the world that we're living in, and it's only going to keep going in that direction. No one's going backwards. So, and fundamentally, in order to live a free life, you cannot put yourself in a position where someone will decide what you can do with the number one most important thing in your life, which is money. Because without it, you're nothing. You can't do anything without your money. So why would you voluntarily put yourself in a predicament where you have to ask permission, you have to fill out forms, you have to do God knows what to access your funds? And despite all of this, at some point, you're very likely going to be in a position where you won't even get to these funds anymore because they don't exist as it is. There's no money in the bank. The money that you have in the bank, that's an illusion. You only see a monopoly number on a screen. That's all you have.
Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, that's so. And it doesn't matter whether you have $100 or $1 billion. All these zeros are Mickey Mouse. Monopoly money on a screen. The money itself doesn't exist. So you need to get yourself out of that mindset, for one, and into something that nobody can debase, nobody can steal. Put your time and energy into something that's worthwhile and live a free life. Because if your life gets attached to a digital ID and a number score, what's the difference between you and a village donkey at that point? There's absolutely no difference. Right? So
definitely.
What kind of life do you want to live? And as I've said again in the past, if you have kids, what kind of a role model do you want to be as a parent to those kids? What kind of future do you want them to live in? Do you want them, you bring them into this world, they have no choice, So, but then you put them into a future where their fate is the life of a village donkey. Why? They don't deserve it. They didn't ask for this. So we're almost like at a historical point in time where if we don't make the move and make the effort to turn the tides, you're fucked. They're fucked. And this is also part of the knowledge and education, that needs to be passed on and repeated as often as it takes until it finally clicks. Now, unfortunately, in my opinion, I think most people are going to get completely destroyed before they accept to listen. Human nature. Sometimes you can't change this. If we're sitting here having this conversation, anyone who's in Bitcoin today, I consider them blessed, because the general population is clueless. They have no idea. And those that may have heard it, they still doubt it for whatever stupid reason. So they're cursed in that sense. You can sort of consider them cursed because they have to go through the pain to understand that this was not a conspiracy theory. It wasn't like some crazy guy blabbing, on the internet somewhere. This was a real message, like geared to help you. But you, for whatever reason, decided to ignore it. That was your decision. So now you have to live by the consequences of that decision. And we're trying to avoid the pain for as many people as possible by helping them, go from point A to point B as quickly and smoothly as possible. And that's it.
Yeah, and you brought up an interesting point before with technology. I think this is an argument we in the Bitcoin community often also forget, because we've done, I don't know, if you've installed multiple wallets, if you backed up your seeds multiple times, you get familiarized with these things. You know how it works, you know the differences in these things. But if you obviously do it for the first time, it's a daunting step. But, so has been for the people who stepped into the first car at one point. Like, for them it was super dangerous. These days, like, I take the bus, I take the trains if I go to the city, you wouldn't even think about it. So I think sometimes it also helps that we in the community sit back and go like, right, I think we're very enthusiastic, we all wanted to succeed, but we have to really take people at where they're at. And this is why I like what you guys offer at the Bitcoin Way, because I imagine that there could be people who could be, 18, who I don't know, are not familiar with computers, up to, I imagine, 70, 80, even 90 years old, who want to step in and want to have your help. You don't really differentiate there in any way, or do you focus on a specific age group or something?
No, we focus on anyone that asks for help. Most of the people that we consult with so far have been like late 50s and up. We've had clients even into their 80s that are completely sovereign from beginning to end.
Wow.
Solid as anything in their comprehension. Very, very impressive individuals. And like, it's for everyone. You just have to be willing to sit down and just listen. That's it. And we've streamlined the process really, really well. I mean, I bring a lot of knowledge from the whole cybersecurity encryption world into Bitcoin. So we're not strictly following a manual as to how to set up a cold wallet and a node. I mean, yes, obviously there are some commonalities that you have to adhere to, but we bring in a lot of extra stuff into the mix in order to really solidify your ecosystem. I mean, you're essentially being your own bank. So that bank needs to be as bulletproof as you can possibly be. And this is an ongoing process. It's not like a set it and forget it. Like, I can consult with you now, set you up from A to Z perfectly, but in 6 months, the environment would change. There's new stuff that's out, new utilities, new tools. The technology is always moving, so we stay on top of these things. Whether it's software updates, upgrades, all of that stuff. If there's new ways of fine tuning a setup, we'll call you up. We'll tell you, all right, man, listen, we have this now. We can improve this by X, Y, and Z. I strongly recommend we do it. And we do that. If you have an inheritance plan, that's also critical that those are kept relevant, because we can set it up perfectly now, but if you pass away in 50 years and you haven't touched it, well, whoever's coming after you in 50 years may not be able to do anything with that plan that you've created today. So that as well is an ongoing progression. And like, this is part of our services. This is why we offer these ongoing remote support services, because it's IT. Bitcoin, it's money, but it's IT at the same time. And previously, cybersecurity was really for design. It was like an enterprise market. Now it's a worldwide market, because it's protecting the one thing that everybody has no option but to have, which is money. And so we bring a lot of that value into our consults, and people are finding it extremely valuable, extremely enriching in the knowledge. Like, I mean, we're doing most of the work, so that's fine. But at the end of it, they fully understand what it is that they have, what it is that we've done, and how to use it as almost as simply as a credit card, Yeah,
and actually, if you think about it, even fiat money, if you look at it these days, I mean, we have our closed-end banking apps, and like you have your Google Pays and your Apple Pays and these things. This is still software and IT. If I think about how often like my granddad, for example, he doesn't like the bank cards, but he recently found out that his bank also offers not Google Pay, Apple Pay, sorry. So he asked me, like, can you install it? Can you show it to me? And I did show it to him, but I already went like, I don't think he can use this. And this is a very, simple interface if you think about it. Like, if you have biometric data, you scan, you verify, you tap, you pay, that's it. But the more you actually look into the system, the more you see these little steps. And from having people and friends who work in banks, I know that like legit 30% of a bank is just a software business, because they keep the business afloat, especially the trading floors. We had Nicholas Gregory on, didn't we, Ian, who spoke about his past in New York when he used to work for a bank. And the traders would call him up, they didn't know how shit works, the software would break, he had to write the algos and these things. So if you really think about it this way, Bitcoin is probably the first form of money where, yes, it is software at its core, or it's IT at its core, as you said, but it evolves into so much more, because you can actually own that code, that part, that IT, whatever you want to call it, and you're not dependent on these third parties.
Yes, there's no counterparty risk with Bitcoin. You're the one responsible for your assets. If you make a mistake or screw up, well, then it's on you. But you can't. You're not in a position where somebody else can steal your funds. That's a big deal. Something like we've never really had before. So but people need to learn it. That's
Sure.
it.
Sure. You mentioned Inherence before, and one of the things I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night or anything, but you do start thinking about these things. What if there are people in my age? You stack an entire amount of sats early on, you get family, you continue stacking just a little bit less because you got kids and they get expensive, and life gets more expensive, but you continue doing this route, you save for the future, potentially for your kids or your relatives, and for some weird reason, like you said, you don't do that inheritance backup, you don't inform your relatives, and potentially once you die and you didn't do any of these measurements, those Bitcoin, I wouldn't say are lost, but they're not where they should be in their rightful place. Do you think with time continuing the way it has evolved now, we'll see better solutions for this as well? Or is this also one of this mindset shift that we need to get over the hump? Because how big is the chance of actually people leaving Inherence and forgetting about it?
No, things will definitely improve. I mean, like with any technology, it gets better. It doesn't get worse. It gets simpler, and as it becomes more, as this use case becomes more widespread and mainstream, new ideas, new utilities, new apps come out that, instead of something taking, for example, 6 steps to complete, it'll take, 2 steps or 1 step. But fundamentally, at least in the short term, it's going to take a lot of education. If you've got kids or family, that have no idea what you've done, you have to take the time to explain it to them. Whether they resist you or object to it, it doesn't really matter. They need to learn it at some point, somehow. You have to figure out a way to get that, message into their heads, because if they don't and something happens to you, then you've just donated whatever you had to the rest of the Bitcoin community. So everybody here will thank you very much. But if you've intended this for your family, well then, they're not going to be very happy, even though ultimately it's, also on them for not, wanting to do the work. So for people that are in situations like this, you don't want to be antagonistic. It's not supposed to be a fight. It's supposed to be a conversation. But you approach it depending on the individuals. You have to figure out the sweet spot in terms of how to deliver that message, and teaching them how to use the tech. I mean, we have a whole bunch of procedures that we implement that are very helpful, but with some people you have to get creative in order to to go from point A to point B. It's as simple as that. Hopefully, maybe in 5-10 years, who knows? I mean, something that takes me 10 steps to do now, maybe I'll do it in half a step, in one step, and with the same result. And then it'll be easier for people to just press a button and ultimately, do what they want. But one thing that I don't think will ever change is that the responsibility, no matter how simplified the tech is, the responsibility is going to still be on the individual if you want to truly own this asset. If you think you're going to leave your Bitcoin somewhere and assume that it's going to be okay, well, then you haven't learned anything. And you're going to, again, repeat the mistakes of the past and get completely wrecked. If something were to go bad and you get rug pulled, like many others before you. So I don't think that responsibility aspect of things will ever change, no matter how simplified the tech becomes. You still have to understand that if you fuck up, it's game over. There's no refund button. And I always advise people, never take or never get seduced or suckered in by the conveniences that may be presented to you. Like, you're going to have services. Come, give us your Bitcoin and we'll give you a Disneyland of features. A lot of people are going to think they hit the jackpot. But there's nothing is free, right? There's always something. If you're not always the custodian of your own Bitcoin, you are taking a risk. So that ETF may be amazing in the sense of bringing, global attention to Bitcoin, taking it mainstream. For sure, it's going to do this. It's a very positive and bullish thing for Bitcoin. That's for sure. But at the same time, you cannot ignore that Bitcoin ETF is not real Bitcoin. It's no different than an IOU. They have to hold the Bitcoin that people buy, like one to one, but they're selling you a whole, buffet of financial services over, around that Bitcoin. If you want to cash out, you're not cashing out in Bitcoin. You're cashing out in US dollars or whatever fiat currency that you're in. That's all. So you're not cashing out in anything valuable. You're cashing out in a debasing currency, in toilet paper, again. Okay?
Yeah.
So I suspect that the first step is getting the attention into the space. Then once a lot of folks are in it, at some point, I think there's going to be a greater percentage of them that will start asking more questions as to, why can't I withdraw this in Bitcoin? Why do I have to take it out in US dollars? I don't want US dollars. And then when they realize why they can't, then, they start maybe taking measures into understanding that they have to take it out in self-custody and, all that entails. But that I think is going to take time, but ultimately I think it's coming. It is coming because, what's the alternative? The alternative is not in your best interest.
100%, and all that glitters is not Bitcoin, right? They could be sort of like promising you this, that, and the other, but ultimately it's not Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the actual value, and that's where the value lies and where it will continue to stay. And this is the thing when it comes to inheritance, is the thing that keeps me up at night. Is I've worked hard, I've understood, I've done all the many hours of understanding Bitcoin, I'm exploring this rabbit hole. It's part of the reason why I've set up this podcast with Joel, is to understand other people's perspectives so I can relearn, unlearn, get different perspectives. And I feel that I'm putting in the work to sort of fully understand the value and to put the signal out there of what Bitcoin is. And if I've got some way of passing that on to people that I love most in the world, are they going to treat it in the same way as I do? Do they understand the importance and value that Bitcoin has in the same, well, not necessarily the same way, it doesn't have to be the same way, but with the same sort of understanding of what that value is? And I suppose then the job lays on me as the individual to sort of like try to educate them and put that signal out there in ways that they can understand, so they win if ever they do get hold of the hard work that I've accumulated for on behalf of them, that they can continue holding that mantle forward for me, all at the same time with these Bitcoin ETFs in the background, and sort of their promises of all the dazzling sort of promises that they might be able to offer you at the same time. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to what I just said, but I did have a
Yeah, I
question
mean,
after that.
yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, you as an individual, you can do the best that you can to pass on that knowledge, but ultimately, how like how they interact and manage that knowledge, that's something that's out of your control. Like there's nothing, you can't control this. If they do the right thing, they have a good result, and if they don't, well, then they'll learn the hard way. With regards to the ETF, one thing that maybe some people may not be thinking of, but as glitzy as that ETF is, at the end of the day, it's still a honeypot. Like if there's all this money coming into this ETF, Bitcoin price goes up, blah blah. People think they're making a killing. It was the best decision of their life. Government turns coercive one day. How easy is it to think for them to just put their hand on that one centralized ETF location and shut it down? It'll happen in 10 seconds. The same way they confiscated the gold, they can do this with the ETF. Okay? So nothing beats self-custody. Okay? There's no shortcut to doing things properly. If you put your money in an ETF, you're taking that risk that one day somebody may decide that, we don't want this anymore, we're going to shut it down, and everybody who's in this now, forget it. You lost access to everything that you had, because for national security, of whatever bullshit, they'll tell you. That's also a risk. So you have to keep that in mind when you make these decisions. There's no shortcut to doing the work, unfortunately. You want to have a comfortable life, well, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, at least for a little while, so that you can be comfortable the way you want later on.
That was going to be my question. You just got to look at the state of the globe at the moment, and what's going on over in Israel and Palestine, and Russia, Ukraine, and you've got all these sort of crises going on simultaneously. The system seems to be sort of coming to its kind of ugly end, or it's coming to a point where people are starting to see the veil slip from the ugly face behind it, and starting to sort of question, I think. And my question really ultimately comes down to this: do you think people are starting to wake up a little bit, or do you think they're just sort of still got their head in the sands? And a double-pronged question: where do you see the world in 10 years?
Well, look, I like to be an optimist. I like to think that, there's enough common sense out there that's contagious and that'll spread, in the right way. A lot more folks are definitely awake, in the last, I think, year or two. I mean, all these wars that are breaking out. Just ask yourself, a very basic question: how do we have all these wars all of a sudden? Like, who's funding them, right? The answer is crystal clear. Anyone who has an infinite access to a money printer can buy anything they want, do anything they like. There's no limit to what you can spend money on. Yeah. So as long as you remain in that system, for whatever reason, whether it's ignorance, fear, doesn't really matter. As long as you're in it, you are contributing to all of this. If the world were to opt out tomorrow out of fiat, the whole thing would crumble. Same day, it's done, it's finished. But when you've been living your whole life, told one lie, and you accept that as the norm now, well, it's a workout to undo this and accept that there is better money that will give you a better life. But again, you have to be uncomfortable for a little period of time until you see that crystal clear. And, I'm hopeful that a lot more people are going to start, opening up their eyes properly as the truth continues to come out, as more people keep pushing out the right education, you keep fighting, the garbage, the censorship, and all that stuff. Ultimately, good historically good always prevails, but there's always a rough transition period, and it all depends on you as the individual how rough you want to make it for yourself. So if you do nothing, you're in for a disaster, in my opinion. And if you do something, you will be uncomfortable for a little while, but that's okay. The outcome for it is definitely worthwhile. And with regards to self-custody, something that's very important, peer-to-peer, you cannot stop peer-to-peer. Okay, that's something that needs to be really well understood. No matter what somebody tries to tell you or try to scare you or intimidate you into trying to make you think that somehow they're going to make it illegal or stop it, you cannot stop peer-to-peer. Trying to stop peer-to-peer is like saying you're going to stop the wind from blowing, right? So you have to be a complete fucking moron to even, think that, an even bigger one to think that's even possible. You cannot stop peer-to-peer.
Christine Lagarde, did you hear that?
Okay, so people need to understand this, and stop being so fearful of meaningless words that are founded by nothing. These are all scare tactics. These are all desperate attempts to remain relevant. Nothing more. If peer-to-peer was stoppable, I guarantee you they would have stopped it by now. Mm-hmm. And I assure you that peer-to-peer of music, movies, software, the big plague of 20, 30 years ago, that too would have disappeared if there was genuinely a way to stop peer-to-peer. So, just keep that in mind, that as long as you do the work, you learn what's involved, you become untouchable money-wise. You want to be sovereign? You want that whole concept of fuck you money? This is it. There's never been a better fuck you money than Bitcoin. But it just requires you to sit down, learn it, and apply it. That's it. And if you're living in a jurisdiction that's a pain in the ass, pack up and leave. As hard as it is, you have to weigh the outcome. Do I live here and put up with this rubbish? Or do I uproot and move? It's uncomfortable maybe for a few weeks, but ultimately my life, the life of my kids, will be better. Because there are many jurisdictions around the world that are not playing these games, that are openly embracing Bitcoin, embracing freedom in its true essence, and people are voting with their feet and their money. They're packing up and they're leaving, as they should. As they say, you go where you're treated best. You don't have to put up with rubbish.
Yeah, we also like to. Well, I'm a bit flabbergasted, Tony. So it's been a long day, but it's been a lot of input and fascinated by your thought processes. We like to end each of our rabbit hole stories with a little bit of challenge for the guest itself. And the challenge is the following. We want to prove the saying, all roads lead back to Bitcoin. And what we do is we give our guests a word and they have to associate it either through a very easy way, like you can buy Bitcoin with this, or maybe they have an anecdote or a story or something to prove that word actually leads back to Bitcoin. So are you ready for your word?
Sure, I think so.
Perfect.
Let's try
this. We actually took it because of your username, because it has a rose in it. So how does rose, or roses, if it helps in the plural, lead back to Bitcoin?
My name is based on the movie V for Vendetta. Okay, it's that's where it comes from. It stands for Victory for Bitcoin, and that's the symbol of victory, symbol of freedom, symbol of living a dignified life, and a big fat no to anyone that thinks that they're going to dictate how I'm going to live my life. That's what it represents for me.
That's brilliant, and I love it. V Vendetta is an awesome movie, and if you haven't seen it, or I
Highly
definitely
recommended.
highly recommend it. There's so many things that relate back to Bitcoin. Once you watch it through a Bitcoin lens, it's very fascinating. And Tony, it's been fascinating hearing your insights and your perspectives and your sort of passion. And if you was to be asking me to board your ship to show me the way to self-sovereignty, I'll be jumping on it with joy, feeling happy. And if anyone else wants to reach out to you guys, it's the bitcoinway.com, I think it is. It's simple
Yes,
as that.
correct.
And for you on the socials with X, it's if anyone wants to follow Tony there, it's V4BTC. So guys, reach out to him and his team, because from what I'm hearing, the feedback that I'm getting from various other sources, that you guys not only hold people's hand and steer the ship in the right direction, but you care about bringing people into understanding how important self-sovereignty is. So on behalf of myself and the rest of the ecosystem, thank you for all your hard work, and the rest of your team as well. It's been a fascinating conversation with you, and for all you listeners out there, thank you for your finite time, and as for you, Tony, as well. And for everyone, stay curious.
Thank you so much for having me, man. This was a brilliant conversation, and I'm hoping, we onboard a lot more people into the space and build one fascinating world for us and everybody coming after us.